So we are going to look at this in this edition, which is part 2. We're looking at the various terminologies being used by Fleet Street and the rest of the UK media about the murder of Sabina Nessa. As we pointed out at the beginning of the week following the weekend, when Sabina Nessa's murder was first reported, the first reporting of the murder was underplayed, as we said. We said in our publications. We said that the murder was being underplayed and that it was being called a killing. We said that it is possible to see the operation of an agenda at play, and the agenda was to underplay the murder and to treat the murder as less important, less serious than it has been and should be treated as. We didn't say a great deal about the motivation in the media for underplaying, or the motivation that the media was repeating from the police. The motivation might be to underplay the murder because Sabina Nessa was, of course, and she is a Muslim, and it is clear that she is a Muslim from a Bangladeshi background, which we could have asserted from her name and the appearance, but we didn't do that because we had not seen any published kind of evidence referring to her ethnicity and her faith backgrounds. But now we know because enough references have been made, especially during the day yesterday, Friday, the 24th of September, 2021, when her sister has been reportedly talking about her sister. And the same sister has been also reportedly praying for her parents to be given the ease of experience by God, Allah, she said, to bear the pain and the loss, to be able to bear the pain and the loss. Now, to what extent did the Fleet Street narrative emerge that referred to Sabina Begum's Nessa's murder as killing? I apologize because her name is not Begum, but most of the names of the girls in the nomenclature have got the Begum. That is my reason for slipping back to using Begum rather than Nessa. So it's not intended to be Begum, it is just a reflex that I unconsciously, inadvertently kind of allow to assert itself in my speech. The record, the history of the criminal courts in this country, the records of the criminal courts in the last, let's say, last 10 years, let's say, show that magistrates, or what they are now called, judges, magistrate court judges and crown court judges, they are on the record as having allowed, number one, at least 10, if not more, racists to walk away from the actual crimes that they have been prosecuted for. Racist or racially aggravated crimes. And you look at the other side, victims of racism are not confined to victims of racism outside of the courts. Victims of racism are denied justice by the racist biased judicial system. So that's a factor that we're just mentioning, not going into more details at this stage. And the other thing is that many magistrates have, or judges, crown court judges have let off blonde, white, female criminals and murderers or killers. And the particular judges making the decision have made no bone, they have not hidden the reason, the motivation behind their leniency. And the motivation has been the physical appearance, the attractiveness of the criminals. So the courts have not, these particular incidents, the courts have not hidden their own aggravation, criminality. And the fact that there are contradictory accounts in the media about the actual attack that murdered this young person shows a very worrying lack of rigor and attention. On the one hand, it has been said that Sabina Nessa was examined, that is post-mortem, and it produced inconclusive result. That is to say, the cause of death was inconclusive. Well, this is the same thing that Sarah Everard, even though her murderer, rapist, and kidnapper admitted all the crimes he committed against her. The coroner's report, the first one, was reportedly inconclusive as to the cause of death. Now imagine the stupidity. She was kidnapped, she was raped, and she was murdered. I mean, what is the point of this ambiguity being inflicted on the situation? Cause of death not conclusive. So we shall be kind of having to wait and look at the various movements on the part of the quote authorities like the police and the coroners and the Crown Prosecution Service. But we make the point again that it is not guaranteed that the fullest rigor will be applied to pursuing the murderer and any associate, any accomplice, because we don't want to speculate, but it is not impossible. And that's all we say at this stage. It's not impossible that in the course of the next few days, weeks, and even months, it may appear that although at the beginning they've been saying that there was a single person who committed the murder, it may appear that the single person who did commit the murder might have had accomplices, accomplice or accomplices. And the other thing that gives a reason to say that is that they said that when she was on her way to the pub to meet a new date or make a date with a person she knew but not had any relationship with, they also said that she had just recently ended another relationship. Now, we don't know the connections between the various persons she was in relationship with or was about to be in relationship with. But the fact that she had a relationship which ended and that she was about to begin another relationship, which is what she was going to start doing when she was murdered. This might be of interest. Let's put it this way. Quite apart from those limitations that I have outlined, the fact that the campaigners have said, various campaigners have said, and will continue to say that women are being murdered in too alarmingly high numbers. Now, what's the actual practical kind of impact of saying that? What I mean by impact is this. If the various stages of the state that is supposed to exist to protect its citizens, if the various stages of the state fail to show complete rigor in pursuing criminals and crimes and criminals against women, then that doesn't create an atmosphere, that doesn't create a kind of culture in which crimes against women of that nature, against women, let's say, murdering, deadly crimes, violence, these are not seen as crimes, offenses carrying significant consequences for the perpetrators. So the perpetrators to be, that is, somebody who is not yet a criminal but may turn out to be a criminal, is not getting the message that doing severe crimes against women carries anything serious. That is the observation I can make at this stage. And this is a kind of fact-based, evidence-based observation about the role played by various parts of the state in safeguarding, let's say, safeguarding people who are in vulnerable positions because of society, because of the culture. For example, Sabina Nessa was a vulnerable person in the sense that her murderer didn't think that murdering her was going to be followed by very serious consequences against the murderer. Because if he did, and I say he because most indications are that it was a man, if he did think that there would be serious consequences to the point that he would be forced to feel deterred from going ahead with the murder, he would not have done that. So it's a kind of feeling, confidence in the crime, in committing the crime, not the McNaughton excuse, that diminished responsibility, which may be played at some stage by the murderer or the murderers if it turns out that there was more than one person involved in the murder of Sabina Nessa. Because reports say that, I haven't seen the CCTV and I don't intend to see the CCTV. It would be too shocking for me and upsetting. But the reports on some websites suggest that the murderer struck Sabina Nessa not far from her home, and then they carried Sabina Nessa's body to the place where it was found the following day. That is not the behavior of diminished responsibility. That is very calculated action by the murderer. The murder and the consequences of whatever they thought would be the consequences of not carrying her body further down the kind of space. What did they think the purpose was for removing the body from where she was murdered? Whatever the reason, doesn't show that this was the behavior of the murderer or murderers consistent with the possible lying pretext that the murder was done by diminished responsibility. What is known as the McNaughton defense in the texts, criminal law texts. So, for example, this woman in Birmingham, this white woman in Birmingham, who carried out a sustained series of physical violence against an Asian man. And it was witnessed by a very tall man of African origin who appeared to be related to or linked to the attacker, the white woman who was attacking the Asian man. And this was published on the internet. So it was not something that could be denied. And this woman was allowed to walk away. The court let her walk away, as were a number of English footballers who racistly abused and attacked various people, Asians and people of African origins. And they were allowed to get away by the court system. So there is nothing in the English legal bureaucracy, courts bureaucracy, that actually prevents the aggravation of the original crime by the racist attitude and policy de facto of the court where the charade takes place of a trial of the racists. So this can be reversed. If the murderer or murderers turn out to be white, then all kinds of racist reflexes on the part of the court bureaucracy will be triggered in order to let off the murderer, going by the pattern of the last decades. So when the Private Lie and the Guardian jointly operating the Paul Foot Award decided to give the particular year's Paul Foot Award to Amelia Gentleman for her alleged investigation into the Windrush generation. What did they think they were doing? Amelia Gentleman did not make an original contribution that could actually surpass or create an original, factual record, more authentic, more extensive, and more rigorous than the evidence given to the UK Parliament, given to the UK series of UK governments, and given to the agencies of the UK government by the victims of racism and the hostile environment, the victims being both from the West Indian background, Empire Windrush, as well as from the African and Asian backgrounds and continents. So that is another short reference to that problem, that possibility. Now, going back to the universities, I was talking about the universities and I was talking about the Russell Group. And I was saying that every single university or every single academic so-called institution, quite apart from the migration-related acts of fraud that get carried out and perpetrated by desperate migrants and asylum seekers. The general actual policies pursued by the Russell Group universities as well as other groups. As I said, there are several tiers. So the universities are academics or academic institutions that don't necessarily belong to the Russell Group, but belong to other groups de facto. All of those operate as businesses. That's number one. They are not operated to seek justice. They're not operated to seek the truth. They're not operated to oppose injustice. And they're not operated really as genuinely, objectively defined platforms and places for encouraging what is objectively defined as enlightenment, which is towards education. So given that these institutions are businesses, it follows that they are corrupt. Because there is nothing in the practice of capitalism that actually requires honesty, integrity, transparency, and disclosure. That requires transparency, honesty, disclosure, accountability, and truthfulness on the part of the business operators or operatives in a business. Which is the reason why the academic institutions in this country do not run any program like this, for example. They never have done. And it's unlikely that they ever will. When the American kind of broadcasting personality retired from the American network, a man called King, Larry King, he was able to be hired by the Russian state television network. Anyone who wants to check, they can go and check the contents of Larry King's contributions. And it's absolutely not up to scratch. Just like the linguist Chomsky has been overhyped beyond endurance. So is Larry King. Because Chomsky has really never risked losing his career by telling the truth. What Chomsky has done is to create a kind of cult of personality based on his alleged height of intellect. There is no evidence that that is justifiable, but that is how he has been selling his trade, doing his trade. So is Larry King. And Larry King is not the only one of the Russian government owned and controlled series of platforms run from various continents. There are many others who are hired by the same networks. And they're bogus. For example, when in 2018, a woman called Sarah Abdullah was applying for redress against the London Borough of Newham Council to the Central London County Court. Exceptionally, the Central London County Court issued a statement condemning the evidence-based lies and corruption and cruelty and dishonesty perpetrated against Sarah Abdullah by the particular employees in the Newham Council's employment. This was not reported in any sustained, extensive way by the Fleet Street. There were some reports, but there were no sustained follow-up continuation of the reports. But the Russian television RT did an interview with one of the women that supported Sarah Abdullah. Now, not in this edition, but we can do that if challenged. The item is still online, the interview, and it was a remarkable imitation of Fleet Street, imitation of the right wing, imitation of the center-right kind of idiocy. It didn't give the facts about Sarah Abdullah's struggles. It didn't talk about the history of Newham Council's lying about housing, let alone the details of the cruelty policy practiced by Roxana Fias, who is the incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor in Newham. And it didn't refer to the visit that was yet to take place, but it was well known to intelligent researcher, fact checkers, that there was going to be a visit of the UK by the UN's so-called special envoy on extreme poverty and homelessness. That envoy's name is Philip Alston. And there was nothing in that RT interview that was even factually, even mildly critical of the inadequacies of the English corrupt legal bureaucracy. And that is the level that the so-called pro-Russian British Communist Party organ called, we call it the Morning Star. They call it the Morning Star, but we call it the Morning Star because of the the role that title plays in distorting the truth, it scars the truth. And so therefore, in the one online piece that we have seen, published by the Morning Star, about the murder of Sabina Nessa, it's just a copy, an imitation of the PA media released version of the authorities on the murder of Sabina Nessa. No sign whatsoever of evidence being sought independently by the Morning Star. Now, the Morning Star is a very corrupt title. How? Because it supports the crooks in all the councils, like Hrs Council, like Lewisham Council, and we shall go back to Lewisham Council in a minute about Sabina Nessa's murder. For the entirety of the 5 calendar years during which Lutfur Rahman was incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor in the name of Tower Hamlets, the Morning Star didn't publish a single critical piece against the corrupt regime that was being fronted by Lutfur Rahman. So the Morning Star is not really telling the truth about anything. Even our Starmer, whom we call the political murderer of the Labour Party, the Morning Star is embarrassingly, ignorantly, stupidly lightweight and off message. That is to say, there is no rigor, there is no democratic rigor, there is no factual rigor, there is no contextual rigor in any of the copy that the Morning Star puts online, because the online space is wider than the printed space, because the printed space is only about maybe 20 pages. But online, there is more space. But regardless of the greater space availability online, the Communist Morning Star is completely, absolutely, outrageously, offensively untruthful and dishonest and opportunistic. So where do victims of injustice, victims of conspiracy, victims of murder in this country seek justice and secure justice? Answer is no, there is nothing. That's why we call this time the dark age, evil eyes, dark land, Little England, dark land. So we come to the end of this particular part B, and we shall continue in due course on the next broadcast.